Good afternoon and welcome to the 12 Points in Symphony Care Management webinar on the Sandwich Generation. My name is Deb Cartiser. I work for 12 Points Wealth Management, and at 12 Points we are a wealth management shop, and among other things, but what we're really known for is helping our clients discover their freedom. And I'm working with Joan Harris today. And Joan, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. It's so great to be here and to be talking about this important topic. So I'm a social worker by trade, but I am a private elder care consultant. And as a nationally certified aging life care professional, I am out in the community meeting with older adults and their families, putting plans into place that will meet their goals as that advocate and that elder care specialist. So working with adult children who are engaged with their families is very much a part of the day-to-day that I do, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Well, we want to welcome people and have you put your questions into the chat. If you can put your questions in there, we can answer them. Maybe we can bring some in as we go along, and if not, we'll make time at the end to answer questions. And at the end, we'll also have my contact information and Joan's, so you can get in touch with either one of us as well. And today, what we're talking about are, as you look at your situation as the middle of the sandwich generation, what do you need to assess in your lives, your children's lives, your parents' lives? What kinds of living options are available? How do you build a team of professionals to help you, help your parents, help your children? What kind of financial strategies are available? What do you need to do from an estate planning perspective? And what services and benefits should you be thinking about and looking at and figuring out how to access? So go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, okay. So we really wanted to just bring home the point with this slide that you're not alone, that classically families are caregivers, are adult children are engaged as primary caregivers or very engaged with their families, and that it's a really stressful situation because you don't typically have that knowledge or understanding of the systems out there, what's available. And I'm so thrilled to be working with Deb, who are very aligned on the financial side and then on the elder care side, that the best way to reduce your stress as an adult caregiver is to really be proactive, make the plan, understand what the issues are that you're going to be facing before you're in a crisis situation. So commonly in my work as an elder care consultant, care manager, I'm being called initially from a son or a daughter to say, Mom and Dad are in this situation. I really just don't know what to do, and I'm really worried about them. So building that team, having the knowledge and understanding of what needs to be done to reduce that stress level for adult caregivers is really ideal. But just to know that so many people are in your situation. In my particular profession, the older adult is my client. But by supporting the family and who are working in the client's best interest, I am serving my client well. And it is a secondary benefit, of course, that the stress level is being reduced when the appropriate knowledge and services are in place.
So if you're attending this, you know what the stressors are. And I think the primary thing that people need to figure out is where are the biggest stresses. And as a member of the sandwich generation myself, I have two kids. I have an 89-year-old mother who's living in assisted living. You know, the stressors can change season to season, day to day sometimes, and it's really about figuring out where to get the help that you need. And I think the hardest thing about taking care of parents with children, you got it down pat, you know what they need, unless there's something coming along that's disrupting what you've got in place, you know how to take care of your kids, and that's going well. Now with taking care of your parents, how do you insert yourself? And really, as Joan said before, how do you learn this entirely new landscape of this industry? And I think that's where people need the most help. But really identifying your stressors and figuring out what you need and where to relieve your situation is most helpful. So, you know, figuring out what time do you have available. You can't do this 24/7. You can't be everything that your parents need. So what do you have available? And what types of care can you provide to them? And really starting to assess where can you get your time back? What are the kinds of things that you can do in your life to get time back? Whether it's, you know, dividing things up among family members. In our family, I have one brother who does nothing but pay the bills. My other brother has a lot more free time and flexibility. He's taking my parents to doctor's appointments. I manage all the financials, and my sister, who's in Chicago, does all our research. If we need to figure out something or figure out how to do it, she's our researcher. So figure out what the capabilities are of your family members and who can pinch hit and provide help, and then assign jobs and break it up so not everyone is turning to one family member. And really the resources available to help you provide care. Joan is a master at this, and I'm so glad she's available on this website because there's lots of nuggets throughout this to help with. And, you know, looking at your financial situation, the most, I'll say this over and over again, you'll get sick of it, but don't disrupt your long-term savings goals to bail out your parents. You know, a drowning person can't save another drowning person. So if you're on steady footing, don't jeopardize that by paying for college for children if you haven't set aside money for it, or helping out your parents and covering their monthly, daily needs financially when it's not in your budget. So really sticking to not disrupting your own plan so you can stay on stable footing is the best thing you can do for everybody. Finding out job resources. What does your company have available to you to support you in the care that you're giving, whether it's to your kids or your parents? There's lots of resources that if you haven't tapped into them yet, they may be provided for free from your HR department, so contact them and let them know that. And then what are really getting a handle on what are your non-negotiable needs, whether it's going to the gym daily, meditating, going off on a yoga retreat, whatever it is that feeds you and keeps you going, what are those things? And then preventative care, making sure that you're doing all the things to keep yourself running. And no one can stay on that treadmill up on high all the time. So you've got to figure out how to work things into your situation to bring you some relief and to offload some of this. I think that's a key part of it.
So how do you assess your parents? It's not always an easy thing to do because no matter how old you are, you're still the child from your standpoint and your parents' standpoint. And that's why having an objective outsider come in and without that emotional long-term attachment and history can be really helpful to do that deeper dive to really understand what's going on with your parents. When we go in to do an evaluation as care managers, we are looking at the whole person. So there's nothing better from my standpoint when there's a financial advisor like Deb Cardiser and her colleagues already in there. That tells me that things are being done correctly, and we don't engage or get involved with finances at all, but understanding what people have available and what their financial situation is really important, because then you can make a fit with what their needs are and the resources that are available. So I can't make recommendations to you for your parents if I don't know if something is financially sustainable. So the finances, we assess capacity. So capacity is really more of a legal term. We really look at competence. Is the older adult really able to manage their financial affairs? If not, there may be different types of professionals if family isn't available or able to step in and make sure that is stable. We're looking at, when we go and do a home visit assessment, show me around the house. We're looking at mobility. We're doing a safety home assessment. We want to understand their medical profile. And really, and most importantly, before we do anything, we really want to understand what the goals are. So if somebody has the goal of aging in place, and we're going to talk about a couple of scenarios around that, what are the things that they need in their current living situation to allow them to be successful and thrive? And also, given the history and the assessment we've taken of all the other factors, what is the backup plan and what is the long-term plan? So having a really good evaluation and understanding the resources that are available, I think gives families and the sandwich generation the peace of mind knowing that things are where they need to be, and that most specifically that you don't have to do it all. That there are different types of professionals you may have no awareness are out there that may not be expensive, that you can offload certain things and know that there's a really good plan in place for your parents. So that's really what we do, is a very robust, very holistic assessment, and then talk with our clients and families about what the options are, and then implement the pieces of whatever that is that they need us to do, or just hand that off, and people really then are empowered to say, okay, I now can make good decisions because I know what's available, I know what's affordable over the long run. So really understanding what's out there. It's really tough when you're looking on the internet and there's over 300 private care agencies, meaning non-medical home care, for example, and non-medical home care. What does that mean? Are people going to be good? People get very stuck because it's very hard to evaluate the quality of supports that they feel that their parents might need. The other piece is you have to be a detective when you are further trying to evaluate your parents, because parents typically don't want to be a burden and they will cover up what they're really dealing with. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but having that really good understanding, whether you're doing that deeper assessment or you're having an outside professional come in, is really important, because that is what's going to allow you to be proactive and avoid crisis. There's a lot of good resources out there.
So in terms of assessing your children, whether your kids are little and you're looking for after school care, where can you get support, whether it's bartering with your friends and offering some arrangements of after school care, or having an established time frame that you know that you're going to get relief. That's really important. Making sure that you've got one-on-one time with your kids, whether they're young or old, and put it on your calendar, because otherwise it'll get steamrolled with other things. And I was recently sick this spring and learning to delegate to my kids. My kids are 15 and 21, and shame on me for not delegating more, but they've got a whole thing going on because I just because I can do it didn't mean I should be doing it. So getting that off your plate and letting them help you. And even the older ones are surprisingly glad to provide help when the family needs it. Making sure they have their own space, especially sort of young teens and things like that. And where can they go to either talk to you or somebody else about what they're going through? You know, if you've taken in a family member, or your time is spent outside the house and dinner's not ready anymore and things like that, it can be really disruptive to them. So making sure that they have that outlet. And again, another place to look for that is resources from your job. Often they have places where you or your family members can get some assistance with that. So really looking at what other resources are available and finding places like pediatrician's office, again, your job, places like that that can give you resources to help provide the care that your kids need.
So this is, I think, a really interesting slide. It's kind of a reality check, I think, for all of us, that it's really not a matter of if we're going to have impairments and decline, it's really a matter of when. So this slide breaks down by age the types of impairments and decline that people will experience in later years. So we have, older adults who are very active and enjoying life, older adults in their 80s who are starting to have some decline, but with the right supports in place, good planning in place, they're living their best life, and really preventative of what people will see in their older years with cognitive and physical decline. With that planning piece, it's just will make all the difference in end of life care and the quality and comfort if people have not waited until very older ages to understand what their resources are and to make sure that everything is in place. So I think that it's just a reality check that, decline is an inevitable part of life. Nobody wants to think about it, but planning ahead is really going to make a difference in what the quality of those years are going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joan, there, and helping us as the financial advisor know what the plans are is super helpful. And, we can put the brakes on the ones that aren't going to work or encourage the ones that are, but knowing what you want to put in place before it's time to do it is hugely helpful. So as you're, in this situation where you're caring for people on both ends, building your team is essential. And if you're working on your parent's situation, enlist their professionals if they've got them. Obviously, somebody like Joan is a critical part of the team. We've worked together on a client and I got information that I needed from her, and she was able to help me in some situations and questions without divulging something that she learned from the client, but things that are able to help on the financial landscape. And sometimes as the financial advisor, I'm able to give information to the family that they're not getting otherwise, the things that they might not see, tells that are happening in my relationship with the client. And if we have the family involved and they've been introduced, it's really easy to then make that phone call. So get introduced to the team that exists, and financial advisor, tax preparer, their existing attorney. We'd also recommend bringing in an elder law attorney. That can be really helpful if Medicaid is on the table, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Do they need a guardian appointed? Is there an abuse situation? Are there estate documents that need to be drawn up? Tax issues and long-term planning, the elder law attorney can be very, very helpful. If they don't have an attorney, now might be a time to bring in an elder law attorney specifically, because they can often do the estate planning and the elder care issues that need to be taken care of. And the financial advisor you should be relying on for doing budgeting and long-term plans and telling you where the holes are in the floor that haven't been addressed yet by your parents. So really getting that, a good understanding of what's going on there. The concierge medical practice can be brought in, and Joan can speak about this better than I can, but really bringing in somebody who is where you pay a fee to become a member of the practice, and then you have a doctor on call for you at all times, helping you to get what you need, the appointments that you need with the specialists. Often they make house calls and things that can relieve the burden on you from dragging them out to every doctor's appointment that they have. It doesn't cover everything, but it can help with the regular medical practice, not the specialists. And then a long-term care insurance advisor. Do they have long-term care? Do you need an advisor to help talk about what can be implemented and when, and really how to use the policy? They can be great helps for that. It may be too late for your parent to get long-term care. It's probably not too late for you to get it, but and we really talk about having people see long-term care in their mid to late 50s. And so you might be thinking about that for yourselves, but the insurance advisors, those people can be very, very helpful to put care in place and to get you advice on how to use it. And then therapists, whether it's a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, home improvement people that are going to come in and have you look at your parent situation. And we were able to put a lift under my mother's couch, and now she can stand up and sit down a whole lot easier. A simple little fix that never would have occurred to me. So, you know, make sure that you're getting introduced to their advisors and go slowly. Don't try and, throw open the door and bust in right away, but really going slowly is a great way to go. And maybe it's just sitting in on a meeting and hearing what's going on, introducing yourself and swapping contact information and going from there. But it's a great place from these other advisors, if you have them in place, to get feedback. And also building that team and having them function together as a team is really critical. Having the point person and then everybody else who can get information from the point person and circle back and forth with that is greatly helpful. It'll make your life a lot easier in terms of caring for your parents.
So when to seek an aging life care specialist? Well, obviously that's what I do for a living. So what I've seen over the many years is that sooner is better. It's never too early. So let's just do a little deeper dive about who we are, because really we're not well known. We used to be called geriatric care managers. So I'm a social worker, but there are care managers who are nurses, who are occupational therapists, but we are private consultants. We all, as any private consultant, bring to our practice our experience and expertise in navigating elder care. I want to pause here and just say that post-pandemic, navigating medical care, private care, the resources, when people go to the hospital, what's going on there in the ERs, everything is so much more difficult. So we have no legal standing. We are your partners. If your parent has given permission for us to speak, or if you have a proxy that's been invoked because they have cognitive impairment, we are your partners. So we're educating, we're advocating, we're making recommendations. Some of the things that we do after the initial assessment and making recommendations is we work with a lot of families and children of older adults who don't live close to their parent. So we're boots on the ground, looking at what services they have, making sure things are working well, taking them to doctor's appointments, and being that emergency on call if they become ill. So for a long distance caregiver who is the child of or is the proxy, a care manager is the only outside objective resource that can be your eyes and ears. But the sooner we can, and I just love everything that Deb just had to say. I named my company Symphony Care Management because it's exactly what she said about somebody being a point person and coordinating services. That's exactly what we do. And so that's my visual. We're not always the doer, but we're bringing to families our best vetted people, resources. The second thing, besides it being so difficult post-pandemic, is that people come to care managers when there's complexity. So one piece is getting involved early, doing a plan, understanding what your options are, even if you don't need them now for your parents, because this is a great time to learn. People can't learn about their options when they're in a crisis. But so we can get in early, do that preventative educational piece, build that partnership and trust, or we're oftentimes jumping in when things aren't going well. So many calls that I get, and probably a large part of any care manager's caseload, is there is some type of cognitive impairment. If you don't really have the education about what that is, oh, it's just my mom's getting old. We're missing that opportunity to do that diagnosis, do the preventative care, make sure people have what they need so that they don't decline more rapidly or fail. So getting in early is always a bonus, because then we can kind of monitor people. So as a care manager, I have no agenda for my clients. Every family situation is different. every set of circumstances. The older adults' life circumstances are different. Do they have lifelong mental illness that is now very complex with a cognitive impairment? Have they had a sudden physical crisis and now their home environment, it needs modification and they need support? So every situation is different. We're only going to come in and work on the scope of work and the pieces that the client and the family want us to. And so it really can be, I need you to help me place my mom in a nursing home. She's been in assisted living and she needs more care. And that is a brief scope of work. Or we start with people in the home and we are their partners really over many years through the end of life. So I think, it's important to understand we're private consultants. We're going to give really good advice, help you access things that you didn't know you were eligible for, your parents were eligible for, help you to build that team with your financial advisor, and just be there for you in whatever way is going to work for your family. And that is who we are. Our national website is aginglifecare.org, which I think will be on one of the
Yeah, it's in a later slide.
The later slide, but that's really what you can read about us. There's 250 of us in New England. There's 2,500 of us across the country. We're really the best kept secret. So if you just felt, gee, I'd like a consultation and just kind of know what's out there, that's really something that you can do anytime.
So Joan, a question came up. Should the care manager be in the state where my parents are or where I am?
Oh, that's such a good question. So we move a lot of people across the country. I recently got a referral. The family lives here. And the goal was to bring mom here. I was able to partner with a care manager where mom was in Iowa to do an evaluation and also to work with mom to keep her well while I worked with the daughter here to make the right fit in the right community. So if mom or dad or both are not moving, definitely have a care manager that is at that location to really help support them and be there for them. If you're looking to bring them to you, and that's a goal, either immediate over time, then we can partner with care managers across the country. We med flight people, we do all sorts of things to get people moved, find their doctors, make sure that it's a smooth transition. It's a complicated process, but we do it all the time.
Well, and I think that's so important, learning that there's so much more out there beyond the scope of what we know. So again, learning that new landscape is critical.
So this was a conversation, this red flags that Deb and I were talking about, because this goes back to what I was saying is that you need to dig a little deeper. I got a call a couple of months ago from an adult son who said, Dad's in the hospital. I knew mom had some memory loss. I just didn't know how much dad was covering up and how bad it was. And mom was out wandering in the street because dad was in the hospital and there was no one there. So within 2 hours, we had full-time caregiver support there, and then we could assess what dad needed for his discharge, either to go to rehab or to go home safely. So if you have, it's just kind of a red flag that if you have just a gut feeling that things aren't what they appear, you need to sit down with your parent who is the caregiver and have a private conversation, because they are very much at risk for their own health. Many times caregiving spouses put off their own doctor's appointments. They're not managing their own needs, their own stress. They feel very guilty about wanting to bring in support. And they also hit resistance from their spouse who may have a cognitive impairment and doesn't have the insight as to why the help needs to come in. So that parent is very at risk. If you notice changes, if you see bruises, people are fearful sometimes to let their adult children know what's really happening, because they don't have an idea of what is available to them and how things can be better. They're fearful that they're going to be asked to leave their home or changes. It's like this big unknown of what could happen if I can't kind of manage things on their own. So my words to you today is really be investigating and having those conversations. And you have very busy lives with your own children and your own families and whatever that brings you. But if you can just kind of do a little bit more due diligence and make sure you know what's going on, because changes can happen at any time, I think that will be very preventative. So living options, this in and of itself could be a whole seminar, because there's so many choices out there. And I think oftentimes, people become overwhelmed. One of the things that I wanted to say is that, again, this is based on the client's goals. So what is it that the older adult wants, and what are the circumstances around them? Aging in place means that people want to live at home. So when we go in and do an assessment, we're looking at, number one, safety. Do they need a safety home assessment? Do they need grab bars? Are stairs a problem? How are they functioning in the home? And do they need some private care support to make sure they're successful and thrive? I have a married couple right now that I'm working with. She has Alzheimer's disease. She's mobile, she's pretty healthy. And he has been struggling, the spouse, with his memory as well. And they really were struggling. They did not like having care at home. But once we did an evaluation of the husband, we realized that he was so depleted from his role caregiving for his wife that he was depressed. And he was having some short-term memory issues that were not really a progressive dementia. So once we brought in really high quality companions and allowed him to have time off, to get therapeutic support, to do things outside of caregiving that filled him up with some joy in his life, he is a much more capable caregiver, and they are now aging in place well with a support system in place. Some people need less, some people need more, but usually based on the financial advisor letting us know what is affordable and is sustainable, we can layer in many different kinds of resources to really support people to their best quality of life. So again, it goes back to our assessment. Is somebody medically optimized, as well as is their environment optimized? If those two pieces are at their best, people are going to have their best quality of life possible. Oftentimes, once we get the supports in place at home, as I think I mentioned before, we'll talk about what are the next steps. What if the husband in the scenario I described passes away or has a major health issue? We already have an assisted living memory support program pre-vetted that he felt good about, and then we would be able to work on that transition, and then we would be her advocates visiting, working with the team there, because the sons live out of state. Retirement living is really all about, for people in their 60s and 70s who are thinking about what that looks like, it's really about helping people to identify what's important to them. What is their vision of what that retirement community looks like? So that's a big piece that we can do at any age, is really help people identify, look at their health issues, look at their finances, what location they want to be at, and then do the educational piece about a continuing care retirement community, which has multiple levels, or rental options, assisted living, we kind of do the whole what is what, and working with the financial team is a really important piece of that. So living options, there's many, and it's really confusing to people. So it's important based on the client's profile, meaning the older adult, to really understand what options are really going to serve them well. Because I sometimes get people into my practice when they've made a decision without all really understanding what they were getting into. So it's really important to get that education. Unforeseen issues with the parent could be a new diagnosis of a cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's or related disorder. That really does change the path of what living options are really going to be best. And when we have a married couple, we really want a flexible model because they may age diversely, and we want to make sure, as an example, that they have access to one another. So again, I think there's so many options available in retirement communities that have different types of financial arrangements and different kinds of services. And if we know ahead of time that somebody has a beginning stage of a cognitive impairment, those options are still very much available, but it's going to steer us in a little different direction for a model that may have a more robust memory support program for down the road when they need it, for example. So I think that understanding options, whether it's how do I age in place, how does my parent age in place? They want to be in their home. Is it realistic? What would be involved? And then what are their other options are really two different pathways that can be really fully evaluated with someone who really understands the system in whatever the systems that exist in whatever location the parent ultimately wants to be.
And Joan, I'm having a chuckle over that because you and I did do a webinar on this a few years ago. And if anyone's really interested in living options and what that looks like, you can send me an email and I can get that back to you.
So Deb asked me to put together a little bit of a list of the types of things that we may pull in to a client based on what their needs are. What I think is really important to understand is that over many years, I am constantly evaluating the quality of these partnerships. So one concierge primary care physician may do things very, very differently than another. So with my 100% lens on the client, the older adult, I'm going to make a recommendation based on what their particular needs are. Do they need someone to do a home visit because they're no longer really able to go out? Or does that practice that is a concierge practice really have the access that they advertise? So we really evaluate and continually evaluate all these different services that can be put in. Some of these services don't just come into the private home. Assisted living is still your private home. It's a residential model. And many of these services need to come in as an add-on as people are aging in place in the assisted living community. Many of these types of services are not that costly and really provide smooth transitions from one level to another. Support groups, for example, can be really helpful for a caregiver. Transportation services become critical if a client can no longer safely drive. And by the way, we do take a lot of our clients to objective outside driving evaluation programs when many families come to us and say, I don't think dad is safe to drive anymore. It's a really difficult process. And so having an outside objective support to really assess the reality of that fear and not to feel that you're going to be blamed as the adult child for taking away dad's keys is really something that we help with. And then to layer in the transportation services, because if dad can no longer drive, he really needs to get places. Companions are a great support when people do not yet need personal care. And they often feel like friends. They do not need a large number of hours. Maybe they come 2 hours or 3 hours a couple times a week. I have a client who lives in a condo independently. She's sharp as a tack. She is aware that she is feeling less and less comfortable driving. And when I told her that the companion could take her to the MFA, her face lit up. And the match has been made, and she's now out with her twice a week. She takes her to her doctor's appointments. She is living her best life in her home where she is safe, but no longer driving. So companions can play a really pivotal role, and a lot of people don't even know that they exist. Adult day programs, and I won't go through all these, are also sometimes that in-between level of care when people are living at home with a primary caregiver, a spouse, or an adult child, where they are in a day program where they're getting stimulation, structure, and social engagement from 9 to 3, as many days a week as a family wants. It's very cost effective. It gives the older adult so much of what they need to slow decline. So it is a great option to keep people in their homes down the road. The bill paying service can be really helpful when someone has some type of cognitive impairment. And we love our bill payers because they come to our client's home and they write their bills with them. We always want to have older adults participate in their decision making and their daily life as to the best of their ability. We don't want to take away things, but we also want to make sure that things are secure, they're not getting taken advantage of, or they're not running in arrears with their bills, and not all families really want to take that on. So as you can see, there are many different types of supports that can be brought in and layered in a quality way to your parent, and you don't have to be the one doing everything.
So in terms of financial strategies and how to sort of shore up this area of your life and your parents' lives, there's no magic bullet. It's so dependent on your individual situation. But in terms of broad strokes in this area is really to not operate blind. Work with a financial professional, get forecasts for what you can afford in your life and for your future and for your parents as well. Two separate things, but talking about them together a little bit here. Where we've seen plans that have been really solid financial situations for people that have gone off the rails are for the middle generation, the children. It's been paying for college that they can't afford, or bailing out the parents and supplementing the parents where they can't afford it. So it's really important to take care of yourselves first and foremost. And the oxygen mask analogy on the airplane is really so important here. And take care of yourself first, and other people. There are loans for college, and there are situations for parents where you don't have to drag yourselves down and drown because they're not equipped to take care of their future. So lots of things to do in both of those situations. Really prioritizing your own retirement savings can't be said enough. Making sure that you're maxing out your 401k. If there's a match at your company, get that free money. No one should be leaving free money on the table. And there are additional ways to save in tax efficient ways. So speak to an investment professional about that, because often there are ways to be able to, if you can't put it in your 401k or you're self-employed, there's lots of things that you can do to really max out those tax-free savings vehicles. And You know, we say all the time in our office, there's loans for college tuition, but there's no loans for retirement. So if you haven't saved enough for your child, son or daughter to go to college, that's okay. There's lots of ways to handle that. And there's lots of ways that they can get a degree that don't sock them with debt as well. In fact, the blog that I just wrote for this month was about college and having the college conversation and letting money be one of the first conversations that you have with your kids so that they are going into it with their eyes open, instead of what happens is often the reverse. Children fall in love with this school and the parents say, oh no, we had no idea that Northeastern was $70,000 a year. And so here we go, we'll pay for it because it's your favorite and that's the best thing we can do for our kid. But it's not. So if you can lead those conversations with the financial piece, it can really come to a different outcome and really come out with kids who are really responsible and have maybe end up taking college more seriously than they would have otherwise. Medicaid trusts are something that is really important, and we don't have the scope to go into it now, but you should be aware of it if you have a parent who is going to run out of money and they need nursing care. Safeguarding the family home and making sure that that can't be used and liquidated is important. If there's a vacation home that people have that you want to keep in the family, there's ways to put some assets in trust and have a way for your parents to get the care they need. They lose some control with that. It's not a perfect, oh, we'll hide this money in trust and then they can go to a nursing home. It doesn't really work like that. And there's also a 3-year look back where the state says that if your family member dies within 3 years of setting up that trust, you'll get taxed on what was in there 3 years ago. So that look back period is important, and it really begs us to plan in advance. So talking to a financial person about that, or an attorney who specializes in working with older people is really important. And you know, in some situations, you can even claim your parents on your tax return as a dependent. It's probably not your situation, but if they have gross income under $4,400 and you provide over half their support, you can claim them on your tax return. So that's something that not everybody knows. Another thing to be thinking about is really simplifying and consolidating your parents' assets. This is something you can get help with from their advisor. You should be looking around for a multitude of accounts that are all registered the same way, you know, 4 different checking accounts. The more that you can help simplify that, the more it's going to take the burden off of them. And if you can take the time to understand why they set it up that way in the first place, then you can come up with some plans that will leave them in control, because that's often the basis of which all the arguments come from. If you can help them keep control and understand why they set it up, then there may be some really good ways to simplify those things and get the help that they need. But simplifying in advance of them dying is really, really critical. And then things to look for. Start looking for around their house insurance documents, and by that I mean long-term care and life insurance documents. Look for paper certificates. If they've got files with paper certificates, get that to their financial advisor. Get those things taken care of in advance. Find out where the deed to their house is kept. Find out what they're doing for a safe deposit box. People of that generation have safe deposit boxes more so than younger generations. So find out where those things are and start working now to simplify. So you're not taking everything over all at once, but you're helping in small ways to relieve the burden of everything that they have to think about. And then in terms of estate planning, if they don't have this set up already, it's got to be in place, because otherwise you're going to be going through the court system to get people appointed, and it's time consuming and expensive. So making sure they have at a minimum a will, and that the appointments of who they've appointed to be their personal representative, which is the new word for executor, making sure that person is current and the right person. You know, sometimes they've appointed these 20 years ago and you and your siblings have changed dramatically, and the person who is the oldest then got appointed, but may not be the most responsible or the person with the most time on their hands to be able to settle an estate. So make sure those appointments are up to date. And if they have a trust, look at who the co-trustees are. If your parents are both, 85 years old and failing, having them be co-trustees on each other's trust is really not helpful. So getting appointed as an extra trustee, you could be the third trustee, or you could be a contingent trustee, the successor. So think about who's been appointed, really look those things over, find those documents, make sure that you know you've met their attorney or something so you know who to contact and they know who to contact. Finding those documents is critical. The durable power of attorney is something that gives you the power to only operate in the financial realm. So it's not, it sounds like by its name, durable power of attorney, you can do everything, but that power holder is only in the financial arena. And we found that in the last 10 years or so, companies have gotten very picky about accepting a power of attorney, even though it's a valid court document, and banks decide, well, we'll only take our power of attorney document. So look at that, find out where they're doing their banking or their investing, and find out what can be used. You can, if you know they bank at Fidelity or they've got accounts at Fidelity, call Fidelity and ask the question. You don't have to ask about their account, but just call and find out what the rules are. Same thing with their banking institution. And what you might find is that what you want to do is sign the power of attorney that's for that specific institution. They all have them and they really prefer their own documents. So ask those questions. And then the other thing about the durable power of attorney is people think because you have it and you've been appointed that you can walk into a bank and start bill paying for your parents, and you can't. Most of these have to be sprung and or invoked. So they've appointed you the durable power holder, but in order to invoke that, you're going to need a note from the doctor to say that your parent is really incompetent. So keep that in mind as well, how you're going to do that, and at least you've got a document. But if it's older than 7 years, financial institutions don't want to take them anymore. So get that redated. You can go back to the attorney and just say, we want to re-sign this, and they can do that for you. Same thing with the healthcare proxy, that should be within the last 7 years. And look at who the appointments are here, because maybe they've, again, been set up years ago, and the person who's closest to them is not the child who's been appointed. So look at that. The healthcare proxy should be nearby if possible, and have access to what's going on with them, and to be able to walk into the hospital and say, I'm their person, please share the information with me so I can help make their medical decisions, because that's what that does. A living will is what dictates what they want and don't want. Do they want to be put on a feeding tube? Do they want to be on life support? Do they not want to be on life support? That's a living will, and that's important to have as well. And all these appointments can be changed. So what we do for our clients is we put together an outline, and we look at the outline once a year and make sure that the appointments are still valid and good, and that there's nothing that needs to be changed. And it's an easy thing to get to be able to do. The attorney may have even provided them with one, so take a look at that, and if they don't have it, ask the attorney to summarize that for you. They'll charge you for it, but it might make your life easier. And the DNR order, if your parents, it's a document that people sign, and there's a Massachusetts order for this. And if your parents have signed this and indicated what they want, and they do not want to be resuscitated, you can put it on the refrigerator or put it on the back of their front door. And so if an emergency person has come in to take care of them, they can see that and get them taken care of. The other thing is in case of emergency, if your parents are still driving around, they have all kinds of different things that can be helpful. They have QR codes where you can buy a key fob. It's got a QR code on it, and then through the company you can have web-based documents where you can input the information that you want to have available to an emergency worker. And they know to look for these things for in case of emergency in a wallet or on a key fob, or those kinds of places. And they know you can scan it with your cell phone to be able to see what it says inside. So you don't want to put personal information on there, but call my daughter and here's my living will. Those are things that are really important. Or I'm diabetic or something like that. Get those things, and in a case of emergency, fob, or lots of other ways you can put that out there just to keep them safe. So services and benefits that are available and out there, look again at the job benefits that come through your employer. Contact your HR person and see what's available. There's probably more than you know. And if you haven't accessed it, making those phone calls just to find out what's there, either for you, for your kids, or your parents, can be really helpful. Everybody should know about the Family Medical Leave Act. You've got 12 weeks per 12-month period. So it's not a calendar year, it's a 12-month period to take care of a spouse, a child, or a parent. There's more provisions for taking care of a military family member, and whether it's paid or unpaid is going to be dependent on the company that you work for, but you can retain your job or come back at a, if it's not your exact position, you can come back in a similar paying position, and they can't fire you during that time, and they have to let you take the leave. So having those conversations with your employer, if you need to take time off, can be really important, and it's typically for something that's critical. It's not just, you know, my parents need more help around the house, so I'm going to take that. It tends to be more critical care. The AARP website has lots of different things that are available, from a webinar of how to take the keys away from your parents to discounts on care that you bring into the home. It has all sorts of stuff. So it's something to look at. You can go on their website and sort of do a sampling. You can't get into all of the resources, but see what's available. And then eldercare.gov, actually, it's not called that, and I realized as I was preparing for this, it's eldercare.acl.gov. And it's a good resource to see what are the care options in your area. If you know that somebody needs help because there's been abuse, but you don't know what to do or where to turn, go to a website like this one and find resources. It has care resources. It's got all different kinds of ways to provide for you and for your parent that are in there. So check that out. It's a worthwhile thing to go find out what's in your area. And then I'll let Joan talk about the Aging Life Care Association.
Thank you, Deb. So my goodness, this hour went so fast. I wanted to add just a couple of quick things. Having these conversations about do not resuscitate or any of these conversations can be really difficult with your parents. Two great websites to help you to understand how to have those conversations and give you kind of the lay of the land for all of that is, number one, the Conversation Project. These are free websites, as well as Honoring Choices Massachusetts. These are websites I refer people to all the time. The Aging Life Care Association has a Find a Care Manager tab. You just need the zip code, and you can find a nationally certified care manager like me any place in the country. I wanted to say regarding protective services, social workers, nurses, physicians, policemen, we're all mandated reporters. So even though I'm a private consultant, when I see financial, emotional, elder at risk to themselves, I'm mandated by law, or I lose my license, to make a report. It isn't that I want to make a report. It often can facilitate making the changes in difficult situations that need to be made. So if you're suspecting that there is some kind of something going on with your parent, mass.gov has an elder abuse hotline, but all states have this, and you can reach out to nurses, doctors, and social workers because we are mandated. So I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to reinforce that one of the reasons why I think the Aging Life Care Association is a great resource is because of the code of ethics and the high standards of practice that we're all held to. So there is a bar that has to be reached to be a member in terms of testing and qualifications and ongoing scrutiny that can give you some comfort, even though, you know, we're all different, of knowing that we are a group of people that can never benefit from referrals that we make. We are that outside objective advocate. So I think that is a great website to find a care manager any place in the US, actually in some other countries as well. And I hope that you're able to connect with the supports that you need so that your loved ones do well, and that you feel that balance in your own life as well. And thank you for having me, Deb.
Yeah, and thank you all for attending. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. I just want to tell you that there are a lot of articles that we've written. I have one that's safeguarding your finances as you age for aging parents and what to do and how to help them. We've got lots of resources on our website, lots of webinars. If you're interested in the one that Joan and I did on living situations and what's available and what it all means, send me an email. I'm happy to share that with you. And check out our website under the resources tab for lots more information for you, your kids, and your parents when you might need some help. Thanks for coming today.